Hi, I'm Josh Katzenstein here with Jeff Duncan, and this is this week's version of Dat Chat Live. We are here to talk about the upcoming playoffs in the NFL. Obviously, the Saints don't play this weekend, Jeff, because they earned that number one seed in a first-round bye. But what are you most excited to see this weekend in the wild card round?
Well, I mean, obviously, I want to see who the Saints are going to end up playing, that opponent. I think those games both are going to be very evenly matched. And, you know, look, we talked to Drew Brees yesterday, a lot of Saints players in the locker room, and they admitted it's kind of a weird feeling to not have an opponent to prepare for. So they're turning inward, trying to work on themselves, self-scout a little bit, improve some fundamentals and techniques, because it would be just wasted time trying to look ahead and guess who they're going to prepare for. So the Saints, I think, are taking this break the right way, and that is to try and improve themselves. Because, frankly, you know, these last 5 or 6 weeks, other than that Pittsburgh game, haven't been the same Saints team we saw midseason where they were just running roughshod through the entire NFL. And I think that's the way these playoffs are going to be, Josh. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I don't think the Saints are going to blow out anybody the rest of the way. I'll be surprised if they do. I think whoever survives in the NFC wildcard round and comes to the Superdome is going to give the Saints a good game. And I think the NFC Championship game, whoever that is, if the Saints get to that point, is also going to be another Pittsburgh Steelers-like affair, back and forth, very tension-filled. So you know, have your heart monitors ready and be prepared, because it's not going to be a cakewalk.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a blowout in the divisional round. I think the Saints are significantly better than the Seahawks and Eagles. If for some reason the Eagles beat the Bears, I mean, obviously that would, send a pretty good message that maybe the Eagles are better than we think. And obviously you worry about a team with that Super Bowl pedigree, coming
Right
in here on a hot streak. But I mean, we've already seen the Saints blow out the Eagles. So I wouldn't be that surprised. But I certainly think an NFC Championship game with the Saints against either the Rams or Bears would be extremely tight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints lost to one of those teams. But I certainly don't see them losing before that game, and I would still probably pick them to win.
Yeah, look,
in the championship.
And they never lost in the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era in the Superdome. They're 5-0. I think everybody knows that stat. They're 1-5 on the road in those playoff games in this era. And if you go back even to the Hazlitt era, the Saints have won 6 playoff games in a row in the Superdome. So there's something about that building. We know the home field advantage that they have there. Sean Payton has alluded to it in recent weeks that they worked all year. That was their number one goal, just to get home field advantage, because he knows how tough they are to beat in that building. I think the word he always uses is it's significant. And I don't know what the tangible elements are that play into that, why they play so much better there, why they have more confidence. But I think it's fair to say I've covered some games in my career, in particular the NFC Championship game in 2009, where the Saints would not have won that game anywhere else but the Superdome. And I think you could say that Pittsburgh game a few weeks ago, they probably would not have won that game. The crowd got into it. The Saints, the Steelers kind of just fell apart in the fourth quarter. And I don't know if that's just the accumulated stress of playing in that environment for 4 quarters, but they kind of came unnerved down the stretch, and the Saints pulled away. So we'll see if it does play into their, into their advantage here coming up in a couple weeks. But I'm really eager to watch these games this weekend to see how they play out.
Absolutely. And you can send us questions through Facebook, assuming you are watching us live right now. And we have a couple already. Mike Wimmer asks, think we will see Simi Cobbs any during the playoffs?
I don't think so.
I'm going to say no. That's going to be a big no for me.
If he was going to play, Mike, he would have played last week, I think. Right. I mean, that was the time to see him get some playing time. It's obviously a guy they like, his talent level. They wouldn't have him still around, and they're protecting him. But I think they're set with the order that they've got. I think Ted Ginn Jr. was the plan all along. Get him back, get him healthy for the playoffs, preserve him. That's what they did last week. And then I think the rotation's pretty set. That's why they let Brandon Marshall go as well. I mean, they feel good about this rotation that they have right now among the young veterans and the vet Ted Ginn Jr.
Yeah, and I think they like Kirkwood, and Sean Payton actually said today that they need more from Traquan Smith. I mean, he's been really inconsistent during his rookie season, but certainly they like the talent they have at receiver, and adding Simi Cobbs was really just a long-term move. They're hoping to have him, around all offseason and then seeing if he can add anything in 2019. Marty Hill is concerned about the offensive line. Do you think the starters will be ready?
Well, I mean, I think the healthy ones will be. We saw Andres Pete in the locker room yesterday, his right hand all taped up, looked like a big club. Looks like he's going to try and go with that. That's a difficult injury to have, whatever it is, to his right hand to play as an offensive lineman. Now, I watched the replay of the game last week when he got injured, and he was trying in pass protection, trying to block a Carolina lineman, and you could see him wince and pull down immediately and grab his wrist. It looked like his wrist that he was holding on to. That's going to be difficult for him to try and engage. As a matter of fact, he played one play after that, and he basically was holding his right arm to his side and was blocking with one hand. That's how much it was hurting him. And then he took himself out of the game after that. So I'll be eager to see how that plays out with Andres Pete. He's been a valuable guy because he's so versatile. Terran Armstead, I have no idea what his status is going to be. I don't know if he can hold up, frankly, with the injury he has. So those are some concerns. I guess the positive would be that they've had these injuries the last couple of years, and they've shown their ability to adapt and to be flexible, and they've got some decent depth there along the offensive line. But there's no question if they lose Terran Armstead anytime, if they have to play without him, that's a big loss.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the big question with Armstead is that, how severely did he re-injure that pectoral muscle? Because he said that he suffered a torn pec against the Bengals in Week 10. So he would have been he was out for 5 games before he came back. And normally, I mean, that's a long injury for a guy to heal from that. So they obviously rushed him back a little bit too soon, but we don't know if he retore it or if it was just, something minor that should be able to heal within a few weeks. But I think the big question for the Saints is going to be whether or not they want to risk Armstead in that first game in the divisional round, or if they want to give him another week and hope that they can get through the divisional round and have him ready for the NFC title game.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you got to put him out there. Can't take a chance. But if he's not ready to go, he's not ready to go.
Right, for sure. And Bushrod seems like he should be ready, so, at least the Saints will have their second option. I do think it would be a problem, as you said, Andres Pete being hurt too with his hand injury or wrist, whatever it may be. I think you don't want him to necessarily kick out to left tackle if Bushrod and Armstead both can't go. But hopefully we will have some more answers to those questions next week. Kenneth Gordon wants to know, what kind of input does Pete Carmichael have in play calling?
Well, I mean, he's heavily involved. He's been Sean Payton's right-hand man for his entire tenure. He's called the plays himself a number of times, I think for even a full season or two. He's a guy, he's kind of the passing game coordinator, for lack of a better term. Obviously, it's Sean Payton's offense. But Pete Carmichael, it's more of a collaborative process than I think people understand. I mean, they're all involved.
Yeah.
It's not unlike, say, a draft pick where everybody wants to know, is Mickey Loomis making the call or is it Sean Payton? They're all involved, and they're all talking about it, and they all make a decision together and go forward with it. I think that's probably how the game plan's put together. I would recommend, if you haven't read it already, read Peter King's story on Football Morning in America a few weeks ago. I think it was before the Eagles game. He actually was embedded with the Saints staff before that Eagles game and really had some great detail about how they put together their game plan the night before a game and how they go through the walkthroughs. And you can kind of get a sense of how the entire offensive staff is involved, including Drew Brees.
Yeah, right.
He's heavily involved. It's not just Sean Payton. They're all making those decisions.
But do you think so? Pete Carmichael reportedly is going to interview for the Packers job.
Right.
I know a lot of people ask, why he hasn't had an opportunity, to be a head coach. I believe he interviewed for the Bears a few years ago.
Colts, I think.
Is there anything you could point to?
Well, I mean, Pete Carmichael, some people aren't head coaches. I mean, plain and simple. I mean, I covered Jim Haslett with the New Orleans Saints. Jim Haslett's a very good coach. He gets a short shrift, I think, with Saints fans. But he's not a great head coach. A head coach, I think, has to be a CEO type, basically runs the entire organization in a lot of ways. And Sean Payton is one of the few people I've seen that's good at both, kind of being the CEO of the organization and being the good coach on the field. It's very hard to find somebody with those skills and has that kind of ability. And Sean Payton is easily the best head coach the Saints have ever had. Pete Carmichael has a lot of the really good qualities of Sean Payton. I think he's very even-keeled, very, very, very smart guy. But I'm not sure he's the head coach the guy that's going to stand up in front of the room and lead a group of men the way Sean Payton does. So I would be surprised if he gets an offer, but that doesn't mean that he's not a very good coach. I just think he's gone into a few interviews before and hasn't found the right fit. He might be if he had the right fit with the right staff, but there's a lot that goes into being a head coach in the NFL. That's part of it, being able to hire good staff. I mean, a lot of guys fail at that. That was Steve Wilkes' issue in Arizona. The coach only got 1 year. He's an excellent coach for the Carolina Panthers, goes in there, couldn't put together a really good quality staff in Arizona, and he got canned after 1 year. So I don't know if Pete's ready to be a head coach. I don't know if he'll ever be a head coach just because I think he's more of a coordinator type.
Okay. Eddie Penny wants to know, how do you fix a lackadaisical defense, particularly in the secondary? How can they get back to midseason form?
Wow. Lackadaisical.
That is quite a statement.
That's harsh. I don't think the Saints' defense is lackadaisical in any way. I think they were a little lackadaisical against Carolina. Sure. There's no doubt. I mean, they were not playing 100%, and that's understandable. Human nature. It's a long season. They didn't need the game, and they were kind of going through the motions, frankly. And look, that'll disappear. No one's even going to think about that Carolina game once the divisional round gets going. And even if they would have won the game by 40 points, I would say the same thing. It was a meaningless game, and you could tell the defense didn't have the same fire. I'll tell you another guy that stood out to me when I watched the replay was Demario Davis. We've seen him play an incredible season all year long. Plays with his hair on fire almost every down, all over the field, and he was almost non-existent in that game. That tells you these guys were just trying to get through it and not get hurt. So I wouldn't put too much attention on that. Now, they've got some issues in the secondary. There's no doubt. Everybody knows it. Everybody in the league knows it. That's going to be the one area that the Saints have to cover up as best they can going into the playoffs. But I think the run defense is legit. No one's been able to run the ball on the Saints team for the most part all year long. And when they're able to get a lead on teams and force them to be one-dimensional, then Dennis Allen can kind of scheme everything up. And they're just good enough on the back end, I think, to where they can, kind of cover up most teams. It's the teams like Pittsburgh, you and I have talked about it, that have multiple excellent receivers that give the Saints problems.
Right. I don't think we can read too much into that Week 17 game. I think, the defense was playing really, really well up until that Pittsburgh game. And frankly, I mean, Pittsburgh is one of the best offenses in the NFL, so I think they did what they needed to do. They created that big turnover at the end of the game when Sheldon Rankins forced that fumble. So I think, defense deserves a lot of credit, but certainly I do think there should be a little concern about the secondary. Eli Apple's had problems with penalties. Marcus Williams had problems with tackling. So I think, if as long as those don't bite them in the playoffs, the defense should be fine. Denise Carter asks, are the coach openings around the NFL a distraction for the team heading into the playoffs? I don't think so. I mean, this happens every year, and it's not like the Saints have more guys that are up for these jobs than other teams. I mean, pretty much every playoff team has at least one assistant coach that's interviewing for a job, because when you have success, the other teams, want to try to, take away the successful guys. Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, I think has like 5 interviews lined up. So I know Dan Campbell reportedly has 3. I think Pete Carmichael reportedly has 1. So I don't think, you should read too much into this. It happens every year. I mean, the Patriots pretty much lose one coordinator every year, but then they still, end up in the Super Bowl. So I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, I mean, both Patriots coordinators, Brian Flores and Josh McDaniels, are going to do multiple interviews. It's par and parcel for successful NFL teams. And the Saints have been down this road before. Sean Payton knows how to compartmentalize this. And it's the perfect time. Look, it's much easier when you have a bye week. The Saints have had plenty of time. Frankly, they probably spent some time getting prepared for this before the Carolina game. I know they said they were trying to play that game to win, but frankly, the Saints have had basically 2 or 3 weeks here to get ready for this playoff game, and they're in better shape than most teams because they don't have a game this week.
So one other question. We actually talked about this on our Dat Chat prediction show, which you can find later. I believe it'll go up on Friday. But just quickly, Jeff, Rocky Alexander is most worried about a matchup with the Seahawks. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's actually the team I think that will be giving them the most trouble, mainly because of the quarterback position. I think when we get to the playoffs, quarterback experience is vital. And you have a lot of young quarterbacks in these playoffs right now. You've got guys like Mitchell Trubisky, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they haven't been in this arena yet, and they're going to really be tested. Their mettle will be tested in these road environments especially. So I think for someone to win a game in the Superdome, it's going to take an experienced quarterback that's been there before. And Russell Wilson's won Super Bowls. He's been in Super Bowls. He's the kind of guy I think that could pull an upset. But it's going to take somebody playing at the top of their game. And we saw Pittsburgh come in here, a desperate Steelers team, a very talented Steelers team, and play lights out. And I would argue that they're as talented as anybody the Saints are going to play the rest of the way. And they still couldn't win that game. And they gave the Saints everything they could handle. And I think it's going to take something like that to knock off New Orleans, because I think New Orleans is going to play their game. They're very confident when they play in the Dome. And Seattle has that aggressive defense. I think they could cause some problems, maybe create some turnovers that some of these other defenses can't. And then you've got, Russell. It would all come down to Russell Wilson, though. You made a great point earlier. I mean, I don't know how they manufacture a running game against the Saints. I don't think they do. So it would take Russell scrambling around, and he can do that and make plays downfield. And against that Saints kind of shaky secondary, that could be dangerous if he's able to get outside the pocket and make plays downfield.
And that's why I don't think the Saints should worry about the Seahawks. I would predict a double-digit win against the Seahawks. I think the Saints would roll over Seattle. Mike Kenny asked if this could be Drew Brees' last season.
No, I don't think so. I've been asked this a lot, and you get asked this a lot, Josh. You have to understand how Drew Brees is wired. I think any Saints fan knows how competitive he is. He's playing at the top of his game. I don't care if they win the Super Bowl. I don't think he sees an end in sight right now. He's playing so well. This isn't Peyton Manning staggering to the finish line, or Brett Favre, 40-year-old man trying to get to the finish line. This is a guy that's in elite condition right now. He said the other day he hasn't felt this good at the end of a season in a long time. He hasn't taken a lot of hits this year. One of the least sacked quarterbacks in the league. I think he's wired to try and win more Super Bowls. I don't think he's going to look at this as a finality. I think he's going to look at it as the start of maybe a run that they can go on with this young core. I mean, we've talked about it. Jeff Ireland's work in the front office. The core of this team, for the most part, is those last 3 draft classes. They've got 12 players that play either key roles as starters or main substitutes. That's a big core of young players that they don't have to pay any significant money to, that they could go on a run here for the next 2 or 3 years and keep that core together. And I think that maybe after the end of that run is when he might hang it up. But right now, I'd be surprised. Yeah,
I totally agree. He has said multiple times this year that he feels like he's 25. And even if you don't necessarily believe that, he's given no indication that, he would ride out into the sunset if the Saints won the Super Bowl or anything like that. So I think, and even when they traded for Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, it's not like he was like, oh, yeah, he could be the future as early as next year. I mean,
right.
Brees, it seems like, certainly wants to keep playing. Well, I think he wants to play at least as long as Tom Brady, if not, surpass him.
That's a great point. I think he's motivated by that. And the other thing, I'll just tell you a little anecdote. I did a column earlier this year on the fact that the Saints, showed interest in Patrick Mahomes in the 2017 draft, and there's an anecdote there about how they actually had to have a conversation between Sean Payton and Drew Brees, that when they were on the clock coming up to their pick, that they might take Patrick Mahomes. And I asked Brees about that. I said, what would you have done if they would have selected Mahomes? And he said, that's okay. As long as he was willing to sit for 3 or 4 years, that's fine. That's the way he's wired.
Yeah.
Even with Mahomes, he thought, well, that's going to be my backup for 3 or 4 years, as good as he is. So I don't think he's looking at the end of the line at all right now.
I'll get to this one quickly. Robin James says, I think y'all talk so negative. Why are you not positive? Robin, we're just answering the questions that we receive. I apologize if we come off a little too Debbie Downer for you, but I think pretty much everything.
Did Robin ask that?
I think we've everything we've said is that the Saints will beat whoever they face. So I don't know how you could take us as being too negative.
I picked them to win the Super Bowl.
I also think they will win the Super Bowl, but hey.
We just don't have pom-poms out, Robin.
Sorry.
We don't have that, but we are very positive on the Saints' prospects. Just trying to be realistic.
Well, and here's another one that I guess could be taken as negatively based on what we're both going to answer. Chris Cormier wants to know if we'll see more Dwayne Washington after his performance against the Panthers.
No, I don't think so. But I was impressed with Dwayne Washington.
Yeah, for sure.
He was a revelation to me. I had no idea.
Wow, a revelation.
He looked good, Josh. Didn't you think?
I've seen him play with the Lions.
Yeah, you've covered him with the Lions. I don't know. He looked good in that game to me. He was more. faster and more athletic than I just assumed. He's a pretty big guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was surprised. I mean, he's the kind of guy that I could see them hanging on to. I mean, he showed me more than, say, Daniel Lasco in his career. But I think the running back position in the future, and I know we're still in the now right now with the playoffs, but what happens with Mark Ingram down the road, I think Dwayne Washington's performance might give them a little bit of confidence that they could let Mark Ingram walk, or if Mark Ingram elects to move on and get a big payday in free agency, that they have some replacements on the roster without having to draft one.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and one I actually hadn't considered. But certainly, if they lose Ingram, I think you feel a lot more confident that you have Washington than they did, a few weeks ago. But certainly, I think it's just going to be boom and zoom the whole way through the playoffs. I mean, pretty much the last 2 years, it's been all Kamara and Ingram, and I can't imagine the Saints would do anything to change that.
Well, and here's the other thing. They only have 46 players active, so there's only so many running backs. Zach Line, the fullback, is always going to be active, so they really can't afford to have.
Well, no, Washington's been active. He just plays on special teams.
Strike that out. Just cut that out of the
Jeff's wrong, as usual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was always thinking of like different game to game. Sometimes they need more offensive linemen. So
for sure,
he would be a guy that would probably be one of the first ones cut if they had they have to have some reserve. They're going to have to think about that going forward. We talked about Terran Armstead, but Sean Payton's got to, have to understand going into each game, we may lose an offensive lineman.
Right.
We may lose, so that might force them to have another offensive lineman up and active, and a guy like Washington becomes, the odd man out because of numbers.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, just scrolling through these. Josh Ford asks, do you see Terran Armstead taking a pay cut next year? I don't see him staying if he doesn't.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't see
no
that
way.
At all. No, they're not going to ask him to take a pay cut. I mean,
he's a Pro Bowler this year. He probably had the best year of his career before he got hurt.
Yeah, he's an elite player. I understand the injury concerns, but that would come into play when he gets his next contract. I can't see them going. I mean, if they asked him to take a pay cut, he's going to be upset. I mean, it's not his fault that he's been injured a few times. Now, I do think at some point, and I think they thought about this past year when they took Rick Leonard in the draft. They want to get another developmental tackle into the fold. They whiffed on Leonard. They took a swing and a miss on a developmental guy, but I think you could see them maybe taking a late round flyer on an offensive lineman, a guy like a Zach Streif or Jamon Bushrod that they can sit behind Ramczyk and Armstead and develop, and he could take over down the road. I definitely think that could happen, although they don't have a lot of draft picks to work with.
Right, for sure. I definitely think they need a tackle, long term. But like you said, I don't see where they get it. It would have to be in the second round. But I mean, they'll probably have other needs. Tight end being chief among them. We had a question about Sean Payton here. Let me see where that. Do you think Sean Payton has been conservative in his play calling to keep it under wraps? It's been overwhelming the last 4 weeks.
That's a good point. I mean, I don't know if he's saving something, but I do think he will have something. I don't know if he was thinking about that when they played Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Let's keep this under wraps and bust it out on whoever we play in the playoffs. I don't think he's thinking that way, but I do think more so than ever, and I've heard Sean say that this year, and I haven't heard him say it before, that they do a lot of scanning around the rest of the league, looking at what teams do, and then they kind of put some things in special each week to kind of the element of surprise. And I think they would have some of those kind of plays. Like maybe they watch the games this weekend, they see something, they want to put it in. But there's a fine line there. What was the line he used about that? We don't want to be in the karaoke bar at 2 a.m. singing a song we don't know the lines to. There's only so much new you can put in. You got your bread and butter, and then you probably have a handful of plays that you want to kind of bust out for the given opponent. But I don't think he's being conservative with the playoffs in mind, no.
Right. I think he might be a little bit. I think, we didn't see Taysom Hill as much. I do think part of that is probably matchup related, right. Certainly. But I do think, that he probably has some tricks up his sleeve with Taysom that we'll probably see in the playoffs, maybe in the NFC title game, assuming that's going to be as close as we think it will be. Denise Carter, again, with probably the most popular question that we'll hear for the next month. Do you believe Brees or Pat Mahomes will be the NFL MVP?
Wow, that's the hot button question. I fully believe that it's going to be close, whoever wins. I think it's going to go down the wire. I think it hurt Brees' cause missing that last game. I really do. He wasn't on the radar screen. He didn't have a big game, obviously, and Mahomes did. And we're in this world where everything's recency bias, and I think that's going to stick in a lot of people's minds is that the numbers stick out more for Mahomes. I think, the voters, we looked at the voting list yesterday, there's 50 voters that are appointed by the Associated Press. So it's not all AP writers. There's people from the TV industry, radio, print, online. But most of the voters, I think, are older veteran reporters that aren't going to necessarily be swayed by a fancy, meme or GIF or whatever of Patrick Mahomes throwing sidearm. I mean, these are kind of veteran reporters, I think, that have covered the league for a number of years that will take the entire body of work into account. And that's why I give Drew Brees a great shot, because he's never won it. And the reasons he hasn't won it in the past often are what he has going for him this time. The team has the best record. He has the highest efficiency rating. Overall, he's been the most consistent of the two. But he doesn't have the spectacular plays, and we live in this modern era where 140 characters, or is it 280 now? It's all about, highlights and fancy plays, and that is what Patrick Mahomes excels at. He's the sidearm, Madden video game quarterback of the modern era. I knew you were going to love this when I went in this direction. And
Jeff hates millennials. We were talking about this before.
No, it's not true. I'm saying
Pat Mahomes is the millennial quarterback. You know what Pat Mahomes thrives at doing? Throwing touchdowns. What do you throw? 52, 53 touchdowns this year? I mean, look, he threw 50 touchdowns. I mean, I don't care how you do it. Sidearm, left-handed. 46. Don't just sit here and say, he's the YouTube sensation. He's really damn good.
Did I say he wasn't good? I'm saying when you get down to comparing Drew Brees and Patrick Mahomes, those two players, and there's not a lot of difference in a lot of their numbers. Their efficiency ratings are off the charts. Their teams are both very good. They're one win apart. So you're really kind of splitting hairs in comparison. And there's no question Patrick Mahomes is more spectacular. He has way more spectacular plays. You just don't see all these. I mean, when you watch NFL football on Sunday, and that's how a lot of people do, and they have their laptops out or their phones, and they're going through social media. Patrick Mahomes is a sensation. He makes these incredible plays, and he's got that momentum in that area that Brees doesn't. I mean, no one has a gif of Drew Brees in the quarterback meeting rooms grinding away, doing the things that he does that Ted Ginn Jr. talked about yesterday that makes him different. Ted Ginn Jr. played with Cam Newton when he won the MVP in 2015. I asked him yesterday about it, and he went into this great discourse about what Brees brings to a team that doesn't show up on the highlight reels. And I think that's what I'm getting at is Brees' value. It's the most valuable player, not the most spectacular player, most valuable player. And the things that he does of value, I think, don't show up in this modern millennial world we're in.
He's just a hater. He just can't appreciate anything. He's sitting here with his new technology, but he thinks, we're all, everyone under 37 is the devil. Here's the thing.
36.
It's a total toss. See? And he says that we're the ones that have to say that we're right all the time. Here's the thing. It's a total toss-up. I mean, I could see, an argument for both players, and I think that's part of the thing Saints fans need to understand in case Brees doesn't win. I keep seeing all these things on Twitter about, like, if Brees doesn't win, he'll be the first quarterback who did this and didn't win. Well, look, all of those things could be said of Pat Mahomes, too. I mean, I think he's like a top 10 passer rating of all time. Top 3 touchdowns of all time. He has 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. I saw one stat that was like, Brees didn't win when he had 5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns. Well, there's a difference between 45 touchdowns and 50 touchdowns. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a tie. I mean, it's happened twice before. In 1997, Brett Favre and Barry Sanders tied. And in 2003, Peyton Manning and Steve McNair tied. Now, that obviously doesn't happen very much, and you would need 25 votes for each player in order for that to happen. But I do think that's a possibility because of how close they are. Because you look at the volume stats, all favor Mahomes. The efficiency stats, all favor Brees. And ultimately, it's just going to come down to your preference. And I don't know. I think if I had to choose, I would say that I would guess Mahomes will win. But certainly, I think it'll be close, and I would not be surprised by a tie.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. That it's going to be close. There's no doubt about it. They're that close. It's a two-man race. And I would not look if Mahomes wins. I can understand it. I certainly can, but I think Brees deserves it this year. And I do think there's going to be a little bit in the voting block that says, let's give this one to Brees, because you can make the case for both of them. I mean, either one of them is deserving, or maybe people do turn in a vote of both of them because they do both deserve it. But I'll be surprised if it's a landslide either way or a decisive margin. I think both these guys have been too good this year.
Here's the thing, just based on what I've read, since the season ended, I think obviously locally people would be really upset that Brees didn't win, but I think nationally there would be more of an uproar if Mahomes didn't win. So if that tells you anything, which it doesn't necessarily. But let's move on because obviously we won't know the answer to this until February 2nd at NFL Honors.
We could do a whole Dat Chat session on this debate.
Don't give our bosses any ideas. Gregory Batiste asks, will Dez Bryant re-sign with the Saints?
Wow, I don't think so. I think they're going to go in another direction. First of all, he had a significant injury, an Achilles tendon rupture. At his age, he already was, struggling to beat defensive backs deep or to beat them in general. I think coming back from that, it's not that they don't like him or anything. It's that who's going to be the best fit for them going forward. Dez Bryant, there's a reason he was on the street for a long time. Teams looked at the tape of him, saw his limitations at this age, and now coming off of an injury like that, I mean, we don't even know when he's going to be ready. I think there's just too many risks there for them to bring him back. But, we'll know. We'll see what they do in free agency. I think they're going to sign a receiver, and I agree with Josh. I mean, I think tight end is clearly the number one need for this team going into the offseason. So I think they bring in a tight end and maybe a veteran receiver if they don't bring back Ted Ginn Jr. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I think he's still under contract, right?
Yes, he has one more year on his contract.
So, I think receiver is another area they could upgrade, but I don't know if they need a Dez Bryant type receiver to upgrade. I think they could use a deep speed guy, and I think they could also use a slot receiver. And I think the guy I told you about, Adam Humphries, in Tampa is the kind of guy I could see them going after, the Willie Snead, Lance Moore type position. They don't really have that guy on the roster right now.
So Jeff kept talking, but I need to point this out. He said he agrees with me. I heard it. You heard it. Ryan, Patrick, and Jennifer in the room all heard it. So
it's very rare. It's like a Haley's Comet.
If we get like a little, clip of that, I'll save it for eternity. But certainly, I agree with Jeff, and you can mark that down in your
you should
diary
always agree
tonight.
with me because I'm always right.
Because I think people are just overlooking the fact that Dez Bryant might not play at all next year. I mean, he got hurt.
Right.
He tore his Achilles in November. Typically, that is a year-long injury. We know Alex Okafor, came back from it in about 9 months. But certainly, I think to be the explosive player that Dez Bryant needs to be, he's going to have to be 100% healed from that. And certainly, I do think there is a mutual respect between Bryant and the Saints. And I think Bryant, based on his, limited time in New Orleans, would like to come back to the Saints. But, I mean, you just have to figure out if he's actually going to be able to do anything that could help them. And I certainly wouldn't count on that at the beginning of the season. So perhaps it'll be something like it was this year, where it'll be later on in the year.
Well, here's the other thing. In addition to Dez Bryant never was a speed guy, beating people with his acceleration or anything out of cuts. But what he does do is he wins a lot of makes a lot of competitive catches in traffic, using his strength and his size and his explosive leaping ability. And we don't know what kind of leaping ability he's going to have going forward. I mean, that injury directly affects your ability to jump. There's been all kinds of stories about NBA athletes that come back from that and don't have the same explosiveness. So I think there's a lot of question marks that not only the Saints, but every team in the league is going to have about Dez Bryant going forward. Timeline when he comes back and how healthy is he going to be. So I think all those question marks will lead the Saints in another direction.
All right. I think that is going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you, everyone, for coming. As I said earlier, you can watch our Dat Chat prediction show on Friday or over the weekend, before all of the wild card playoff games begin. And we will be back here next Thursday at 11 to talk about the Saints' upcoming matchup in the divisional round. You can download the podcast on Spreaker, iTunes, and at NOLA.com. And you can check all of our coverage throughout the week on all things Saints. Have a good one.